Buonasera, buon pomeriggio a tutte le persone presenti in aula e agli amici e colleghi studiosi che ci seguono da casa tramite lo streaming. Do a tutti loro il benvenuto a questo ultimo appuntamento del seminario permanente di storia del papato, ultimo di quest'anno perché poi riprenderemo a ottobre. Ho il piacere di salutare il padre Bernard Durat, presidente del Pontificio Comitato di Scienze Storiche, che con la sua presenza ci onora enormemente. Qui lei è di casa, non solo è benvenuto ma è di casa, grazie di essere qui. E do anche il benvenuto a Olivier Sibre che ci aprirà a un orizzonte spaziale che finora non abbiamo considerato nei nostri seminari, che è quello dell'Asia Pacifica, o Asia Pacifico, in italiano si può dire in tutti e due modi, e aprendoci anche alla contemporaneità. Abbiamo cominciato con il tardo antico, ci siamo poi mossi verso il Medioevo ed è il secondo appuntamento sul Novecento, ma su quest'area specifica è la prima volta. Noi siamo curiosi di sentire la freschezza delle ricerche archivistiche portate avanti da Olivier Sibre, che non presento perché lascio la parola al dottor Andrea Verardi, che è l'anima di questo seminario, e grazie per l'organizzazione. E anche un bentornato Olivier Sibre, che parlò qui in Gregoriana nel convegno sui concordati nel 2019, sempre su un tema asiatico, e poi pubblicammo per Archivum Storia Pontificie. Grazie, benvenuti a tutti loro.
Grazie il direttore Regoli per l'apertura di quest'ultimo seminario, e per me è un piacere e un onore presentare il dottor Olivier Sibre, che è direttore di ricerca presso l'Istituto Georges Pompidou ed è membro partner del progetto SIRIS, Sorbona Relazioni Internazionali, Identità e Civiltà dell'Europa. Olivier Sibre ha studiato e si è dottorato all'Università Sorbona di Parigi, con una tesi sulla Santa Sede e l'Estremo Oriente da Leone XIII a Pio XII, che è stata pubblicata nel 2012 dall'École Française de Rome. Ha ricevuto il premio Jean Saint-Denis dell'Académie des Sciences Morales et Politiques ed è specialista della storia delle relazioni internazionali, della storia politica e religiosa, e che oggi ci presenterà in lingua inglese le sue ricerche, come diceva il direttore Regoli, fresche d'archivio sul rapporto tra la Santa Sede e gli Stati Uniti nel processo di ricostruzione dell'area dell'Asia Pacifica o dell'Asia Pacifico. Benvenuto e buona conferenza.
Grazie a tutti. Allora, in inglese, sì, per questa volta. It's longer possible to consider research on the pontificate of Pius XII and even the following aunts without integrating the concrete and essential partnership with the United States, whether it be the American Church, the Army, the American administration, or the governmental organization. It's even more than a partnership because the American structures infuse the local ecclesial and missionary organization and culture. The culture of social work, the ecclesial organization on the model of the National Catholic Welfare Conference, NCWC, the roots of the future episcopal conferences, and even the reconfiguration of the banking and financing networks and practices of the Holy See. For example, in January 1946, Cardinal Spellman created an American committee to manage APSA's investment portfolio on Wall Street. As for the war relief services created by the NCWC in 1943, they were at the disposal of the new reconstruction weapon created by Roosevelt. It was one of 25 relief agencies approved by the War Control Board, funded by the National War Fund, which raised $120 million US dollars each year for relief and reconstruction around the world. The WRS fall within the legislative framework set by Congress for licensed relief organizations such as LARAS, licensed agencies for relief in Asia. Welfare is becoming the keywords for transformation and fusions on the spot that is challenging governance at the top. The church became involved in the security architecture and economic model of the area. United States take bilateral treaties with Manila and Tokyo in August and September 1951, with South Korea in 1953, and with Taiwan in 1954, as well as with Australia and New Zealand in 1951. The NCWC was created in 1917 in the face of the new challenge of the United States entering the war. It was again the war that significantly changed and transformed not only societies and economies, but also the local church. The gap created by the destruction gave way to an offer of American services that the Holy See could not do without. And in this story, Cardinal Francis Spellman is the key man, welfare is a key word. Our conference will therefore follow Spellman's tours of Asia Pacific on the borders of his other dioceses, the US Army, Japan and Pacific, Philippines, China, and Korea. One might first ask, what did Pius XII personally think about the American Armada in the Pacific, and of its leader, MacArthur, who assumed in Tokyo the full powers of a proconsul or shogun? The few lines of thanks from Montini to Archbishop of Manila or Doherty express the usual pragmatism of the Holy See. In token of the grateful appreciation, the Sovereign Pontiff prayed that the labors of General MacArthur and his able assistants may enjoy an abundance of heavenly blessing. 18 June 1946. More exactly, referring to the General's words to the Archbishop of Manila in September 1945, His Holiness expresses deep gratitude for the feelings of sympathy expressed by the General for the Catholic missionaries and their works in the Philippines, and is confident that the present harmonious relations existing between the civil and ecclesiastical authorities will continue, and that in this way the mission of the Church and the progress of Christian civilization in these lands will be facilitated. The delegate in Tokyo met MacArthur for the first time in late November 1945. What remains is a picture of converging interests, a military man coupled with a politician and religious man, ready to launch a crusade in Japan and to support the reconstruction of the Church in the Philippines. MacArthur himself was well connected with the Catholic hierarchy, both in the Philippines and in Australia, as was the Archbishop of Brisbane, where he had his headquarters for a time, and Cardinal Gilroy. But Pius XII added to MacArthur's encouragement his confidence that the Catholic of the United States, already so generous in material and spiritual aid to countries in need, will send missionary and financial aid to those regions and islands of the Pacific where the war has ravaged the countries and decimated the ranks of the clergy. I am confident too, he said, that the arrangement with the NCWC will secure the necessary funds and assistance for other works. In other words, Pius XII fully supported the NCWC's material financial commitment to the Philippines. In the Philippines and Japan, the representative of the Holy See a backseat to missionary priests, often American. From September onwards, Father Bitter, but also Father Byrne from Kyoto, whose American Foreign Missionary Society Marino had a very important influence in Japan, China, and Korea, were the liaison officer with the military authorities. As we know, the US military spreads its internal affairs, intelligence, and foreign relations section everywhere. And to collaborate with this structure, including intelligence, while the Japanese government survives under trusteeship, Father Bitter represents Bishop Marella at SCAPE, Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers. Thus, in January 1946, together with some American military chaplains and some American Catholics from SCAPE, it was decided to create a rehabilitation committee for the Catholic Church in Japan. The committee becomes the basis of the new Catholic Central Committee, in the service of the bishops on the model of the NCWC. This committee had a pivotal role in coordinating the flow of funds, material, import-export, currency exchange, and the distribution of relief to the various dioceses in Japan. The bank account of the Apostolic Delegation is at the National City Bank in New York, and payment for the propagation of the faith from Rome through the American section, as well as from the NCWC, go through the Apostolic Delegation in Washington. This setup is closely linked to the regulatory constraints imposed by the occupation authority. The committee even relies on an American from Scape who has returned to the United States. To facilitate the ordering of large-scale material, their shipment, the appeal for donation, and the sending of these donations to Japan. This committee in Japan was an interface between the delegation, Scape, Japanese hierarchy, and other agencies, and especially with the US military, for example, for shipping energy, oil, and other basic supplies. Father Bitter was the LARA, Licensed Agency for Relief in Asia, representative in Japan, and in charge of the sub-delegation of the military ordinariate, entrusted by Spellman to Marella for Japan, Korea, and Formosa. Under his successor, Bishop de Furstenberg, Father Dune, a priest of the Baltimore diocese, assisted him as assistant theater chaplain for Far East Command. The map of ecclesiastical district was sometimes even adjusted to the evolution of the military occupation. Thus, in April 1945, the American military authorities obtained from the propaganda the substitution of an American for the Spanish Vicar Apostolic, who had himself become a suffragan of the Diocese of San Francisco, while incorporating the Mariana Island, thus leaving the jurisdiction of the Apostolic Delegation of Tokyo in favor of that of Washington before the Japanese surrender. Finally, Spellman, an apostolic vicar of the US Army, a chairman of the NCWC, is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the United Service Organization, USO, and leads the Governance Committee of the National Catholic Community Service, NCCS. The USO was created in 1941 to boost morale by bringing together pre-existing faith-based structures, Protestant and Jew, without the Catholic Church. In Philippines, Jesuit Father Early was appointed delegate by Delegate Piani in February 1945 in the middle of the Battle of Manila as Secretary General of the new Catholic Welfare Organization, CWU. Early was the head of the Jesuit mission since 1936 and had been interned by the Japanese in the Santo Tomas camp. The delegate wrote to Douglas MacArthur on February 1945, in union with all their excellencies, the Roman Catholic archbishops and bishops of this island, and with all my heart do I offer you the fullest cooperation of the Roman Catholic Church in whatever way it may be possible, and wrote that Early was Secretary General with full powers to facilitate every possible assistance to the military, civil, and relief authorities. In the Philippines, James Haggerty, a veteran Jesuit missionary, was appointed Vicar Delegate of the American Military Ordinariate. As the American Army neared the Japanese surrender, the extension of the vicariate to the armies led to the creation of the subdelegation entrusted to Marella in Tokyo on 26 January 1946. Returning permanently to Tokyo on 23 December 1945, Marella visited Korea for 10 days and received the first American chaplains. Cardinal Spellman was the first American bishop to visit the Philippines in August 1945 during his Asia-Pacific trip. If MacArthur's staff mentions the destruction in Manila worse than Stalingrad or Coventry, Spellman adds, I saw only one city more completely devastated than Manila, Warsaw. As for the American ambassador McNutt, he described whole country country is on dead center. In the Philippines, the CWU was planned at the end of 1944 with Bishop Spellman, General Director of the American Episcopal Committee of Mission, for Mission, another function of Spellman, to organize a common Catholic front to deal with the official circles of the government and under the control of the Philippine Episcopate. In Washington on January 1945, all the missionary societies working in the Philippines organized a committee to suggest a solution in which the American Propagation of the Faith Office and the Catholic Students' Mission Crusade participated. The CWO is concerned with the financial side of the reconstruction of the church in the Philippines. Within a year, it became the only intermediary body between the hierarchy and the delegate on the one hand, the American Episcopate, American government, and Philippine authorities on the other. As early as 1946, the Philippine church had already received $1 million from WRS and $500,000 from the US Army to help the most affected people. The NCWC was appointed by the Holy See in November 1945 as the official representative of the Philippine hierarchy to the US government. But above all, the CWO managed the problem of damages planned by Washington for the Philippines. On June 1945, the Special Commission War Damage Corporation visited Manila for a Philippine war damage survey, a basis for discussion in Congress, estimated at $800 million. The church then estimated its damages at $125 million. On January 46, the Senate committee in charge of the file projected a budget of 78 million, then 55, and finally 5 million for the church. The NCWC then argued against the amount and claimed the right to have a war damage form filled in. The CWO organized the assessment among the bishops and was in contact with the Philippine War Damage Commission. On June 1946, Cardinal Stritch, Archbishop of Chicago, wrote to Father Hurley, "Now that our government has made the appropriation of $400 million for the rehabilitation work in the Philippines and set up the commission to make grants from this appropriation, I think that it's very important that the CWO in the Philippines arrange to have all Catholic claims pass through its hands. They should be carefully examined and put in good shape before presented them to the Commission." The War Damage Commission was responsible for allocating all funds for reconstruction between 1947 and 50. Every important decision was made in agreement with the new republic, but it was first a Washington affair. The Philippine rehabilitation program, supported by US rule, had two components: rehabilitation of government facilities and support for the rehabilitation of private organizations, which included the Catholic Church. Upon liberation, relief was provided by the US Army, UNRWA, United Nations Rehabilitation Reconstruction Agency, funded by the United States, and the US Commonwealth government. The Philippine Rehabilitation Act of 1946 and the War Claims Act of 1948 made 10 million available for the church. On 13 July 1948, Hurley was congratulated by the Secretariat of State. The Cardinal was praised by Pius XI on 13 November 1948 for his investment in the settlement and defense of the church's interest in the reparations dossier with American authorities. He wrote, "The information which Your Eminence supplied proved of very great value to the Holy See, while your foresight in enlisting the good offices of the NCWC to hold a watching brief for the interest of the Church in the Philippines at the State Department in Washington was instrumental in effecting a substantial and most beneficent change in the legislation governing the eventual compensation to be paid to the church. Continuing to follow the file, Spellman finally learned on April 9, 1952, from House of the Representative Majority Leader John McCormack that President Truman had signed on the same day Bill S. 1415 regarding war damages in the Philippines, subsequently enacted as Public Law 303. Up to that date, and thanks to Spellman's commitment, the church had obtained $10 million. With the new one, it is $20 million more. The CWU achieved other legislative successes on church property and social reforms, and engaged in relief work, education, and the apostolate as well, a perfect replication of the NCWC on a Philippine scale. China, it's very long exposed for China, but I will try to explain. During this Asia-Pacific tour after the Japanese surrender, Spellman visited China and Chongqing, the seat of the nationalist government, on October 1945. As early as 1941, the United States sent a military mission to China. The missionary network was extremely active. Bishop Zanin, apostolic delegate, maintained contacts with the nationalist regime in Chongqing, delegating his powers to Bishop Johnson for a few months. In January 1955, the Holy See sent $7,247,000 Chinese to the victims of the war. The Chinese Catholic Chinese dollar, less than the value, US dollar value. The Chinese Catholic Medical Service, created and registered with the Chongqing government in 1952, is based in Shanghai. It delivers 11 million Chinese dollars of child welfare, medical relief, leper aid, middle school, and general relief. This structure was created at the instigation of Bishop Yupin, apostolic vicar in Nanjing, who was very close to Chiang Kai-shek. The center is managed by the American Jesuit father from California. The creation of the CCMS was part of a coordinated American action to raise funds for relief and rehabilitation in China. United China Relief, created in New York in 1941. In 1947, the structure became United Service to China. In the United States, as of 1941, Spellman agreed to an annual contribution of $10,000 to UCR through the Bishop's War Emergency and Relief Committee, which led in the same year $100,000 in help for missionaries in China from UCR. Several missionaries became UCR agents, obviously Americans, especially the Jesuit father in Shanghai. It is also the NCWC that provides lists of missionaries for cooperation with the Red Cross. By May 1943, the cooperation with nationalist government was set up directly through the propagation of the faith in New York. The finance minister Kung granted $40 Chinese for every US dollar sent from the United States for the Catholic missions. The payment channel was Chase National Bank in New York and Central Bank of China in Chongqing. The propagation of the faith in New York, or Father Mark Tenyan in Chongqing, take care of the bank transfer order and deliver the money to the recipients, and they negotiate the best exchange rates. The Bishop's War Emergency and Relief Committee sends the money through the Holy See, Lior, the UCR, or directly through some bishops in China. In addition to individual donations, the propagation of the faith sends subsidies determined by the Superior Council in Rome. The General Secretary is Nigris. In 1943, $343,000 for 50 apostolic vicariates, but far less than what all the American structures sent to the Catholic mission. The United States wanted to completely eradicate hunger in China through a general reconstruction with UNRWA, that is to consolidate the nationalist regime. To this end, the United States financed 22% of UNRWA in China until 1948, 474 million US dollars. China sent a representative to the organization in 1944 and founded the CNRA to carry out the reconstruction operations while UNRWA provided the expertise. In Rome, on 8 July 1945, Pius XI officially received a UNRWA delegation praising its mission to rebuild the nations. The day after the Japanese surrender in September 1945, the War Relief Services sent a representative to China to the UNRWA, whose office in China was opened in Shanghai at the end of 1944, Father Omelia of Maryknoll Society. And it's very complicated to explain the contact between Bishop Swanstrom of National Catholic Welfare Conference, O'Boyle, future Archbishop of Washington, War Relief Services, Bishop Hupin, etc., and representative of UNRWA, Kaiser, to organize this representation of UNRWA from the Catholic Church in China, in accordance with and communication with the apostolic delegate. But the result was, after discussion of Zanin with Omelia and ordinaries and missionaries, a general program and the creation in July 1946 of the Catholic Welfare Committee of China, headed by Father Maguire, a member of the Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Social Affairs in China. The CWCC was set up on July 46 in the Franciscan Procure in Shanghai. CWCC also provide expert training for social workers with American trainers from National Catholic Welfare Conference, and regional delegates are urged to sit on local relief committees whose representatives are often government officials. But the communist space is outside the CCWC because the communist branch of UNRWA in China does not work, in fact. The beginning of the, in practice, the CCWC worked with UNRWA and 15 other American agencies, Southern Baptist Convention, etc., and 10 British agencies and 8 other foreign ones. In practice, the CWCC served as the agency for all the relief structure of the American Catholic Church and as the task of assisting, representing, and defending the interests of ordinary people at the headquarters of relief organization in China. Funding from first War Relief Services, after Children Emergency Fund and the Economic Cooperation Administration, because from 1948, when militarily US retired from China, the Marshall Aid was spread in China after the failure, the total failure of the Marshall Mission in 1946. It was a mission to organize a peace between Communist Party and Kuomintang. In this context, February 46, first Cardinal, Chinese Cardinal, Bishop Tian Zhengxing. And the Cardinal asked for hierarchy, Catholic hierarchy in China, regular Catholic hierarchy. He obtained the hierarchy. And in July, the new internunciature, because the nationalist regime wanted absolutely a nuncio, and Gilligan Martin Gilligan come with Monsignor Ribéry. Gilligan is an addetto of Montini, and Ribéry take with him in China. And Gilligan is co-founder of the Rome Club of the USO, United Service Organization, and founder of the Allied Holy Name Society in Rome. So an American of military milieu. He succeeded to O'Melia as the War Relief Services representative in China. He organized, and step by step, he took over the management of the internunciature, especially at the moment difficult when he was a branch of the internunciature in Hong Kong, Canton, and after Guangzhou, and after in Hong Kong. He secured the subsidies paid by the OPM, Pontifical Mission Works, to the mission. For example, for 1948, $1,450,000 US. Bishop MacDonnell and Bishop Fulton Sheen, after directors of propagation of the faith, pay the OPM subsidies into an internunciature account at the National City Bank in New York, like Morella's account in Tokyo. The money is then deposited in the bank accounts of the procurators of the missionary congregation in the USA. The distribution is carried out and checked on the spot by Bishop Gilligan, who also collects the annual subsidies requests for the bishops in China. But in 1950, its communist victory, the US Treasury imposed an embargo on money transfers to mainland China, and Spellman and the NCWC obtained licenses to send money with the channel is the US Consul General in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, Gilligan organized relief to refugees fleeing the communists. This included missionaries in collaboration with the CWCC. Cardinal Spellman suggests to Montini that Gilligan should succeed Bishop Ribéry after he departs for Taiwan. So the entire funding and logistics of the Catholic Church and its work in China at this moment, in Free China, including communist-occupied China, was thus based on Americans and mostly on American funding from the Church, Catholic agencies, and third-party agencies. And after, the CCWC served of a pillar as base for to reorganize the Synodal Commission. It was the first structure in Far East to organize organization for bishop for the church in China. And Maguire suggests to have more branch matters in this organization, with welfare especially, and Ribéry and Propaganda Fine Fumasoni Biondi accept the schema of this new organization. It is a Chinese Catholic Bureau who succeed to Synodal Commission. So in China, the hybridization between the local and missionary church on the one hand and the US church with the US civil structure on the other hand was thus of considerable scope before the communist victory and the expulsion of the internuncio in 1951. To finish, Korea. So in Korea, it's very deep and very important aspect of this subject. I will try to summarize. Cardinal Spellman made his last mission to China in 1948, but he made other trips on the regions, especially during the Korean War. He visited the 8th Army and UN troops every Christmas. In the Korean War, every aspect of cooperation between Holy See, American Church, American Army, and United Nations crystallizes. I will limit myself here to the main point. First, Korea received huge official funding from the US Congress. For 1950, the funding package was $60 million, a sum that the government of South Korea is still waiting for anxiously every year. In 1947, the American missionary Byrne from Kyoto was appointed apostolic visitor, and in 1949, the first apostolic delegate. He worked with Father Bitter in Tokyo to contact the MacArthur General Headquarters for several years until his deportation at the end of 1915 and his death. He carried out a policy of complete alignment with the United States, publicly supporting the Ray Eastman, president of South Korea, the government, and the US headquarters in Korea. MacArthur considered him a great man. He criticized the weakness of the UN Commission in 1948, publicly condemned the communist threat, and obtained quasi-official recognition of the Seoul regime by the Holy See. His secretary is also an American, Father Booth of Maryknoll. Rome followed his reports and request to the latter. After the surrender, the first American missionaries to return to Korea were Maryknoll Father, George Carroll, and Hugh Craig. Carroll immediately became the relief delegate of the War Relief Services, which had a relief program in Korea. As in Japan, the 8th Army did not allow private agencies to handle import-export. Therefore, Carroll got to the Army to channel all supplies. However, the State Department allowed the delegate of the private agencies to work on site and requested medical supplies from them. The situation was very complicated with the Korean War. Byrne was reported as disappeared. The apostolic delegate Maximilian de Fürstenberg took over the management of Korea and left Bishop Carroll to manage all material and relief matters from the summer of 1950. As Ribery did with Gilligan in Hong Kong. In 1951, Carroll became the official representative in Korea. He could therefore negotiate with the military and religious authorities and the UN representative. But Fürstenberg went to Korea whenever he could. 15 states continued to be represented in Seoul, and various international organizations are involved. UNICEF, UN Kirk, and UN CRE. The flow of refugees is unceasing, so relief efforts need to be perfectly coordinated. Carroll moved to Busan, the bridgehead of the UN recapture, to coordinate relief supplies. Busan is a city where millions of refugees end up in the first few weeks. Fürstenberg transfers the sum, amounts, via the delegation's account in New York. Carroll sometimes personally brought the amounts in cash, and it was the ordinary people who distributed them, sometimes army representatives at the beginning of the war, or even refugees during the June 1950 debacle. From 1955 to 1954, the system was as follows. Most of the funds were held by the Propagation of the Faith in New York, and the rest was deposited in a personal account of the apostolic delegate in the New York City Bank. The ordinaries continued to communicate emergency. In January 1952, Nigris sent Fumazioni an assessment of the damages and a request for reconstruction subsidies, which were more urgent as the Allies were planning reconstruction. The Korean bishops, still meeting in the middle of the war, discussed in 1951 the matter of the channel and management of funds for reconstruction. But the reconstruction fund of propagation of the faith was stopped at the end of December 1952 to check first the American intentions of financing and thus to avoid useless expenses. This is the same method as in the Philippines. Finally, if the charitable and educational works could eventually receive UN funding, this was not possible for churches, especially since almost 100% of the damage had been done by the communists. Carroll is appointed by the Korean ordinaries to manage the Catholic relief services. He sometimes travels to the United States to visit the War Relief Services headquarters. And the US Army helps to repair and support the missionary works. Most missionaries have the APO, Army Post Office. The church was ready to cooperate. The seminary in Seoul was used as the Army's headquarters during the period of the recapture of Seoul and was returned after the war. Carroll also attending meetings with Korean government officials and officials of relief and rehabilitation. Carroll in 1992 was also tasked with the creation of the first national chaplain's corps in an Eastern Army with Reverend William Shaw. He organized a chaplain school, and there was its Spellman also that obtained money for this. Nigris in the subsidies, ordinary subsidies, give, for example, 1952, $8,000 for the year. The American Army in Korea has a head chaplain, Bishop Cherry, under the authority of the subdelegation in Tokyo, which is actually under the responsibility of Father June under Furstenberg Apostolic Delegation. The American Army provided the UN chaplaincies with everything that we needed, etc., etc. There was also the problem of the exemption of seminaries from military service, and a conversation between Spellman and General von Fleet in December 1951. Spellman is in Korea for New Year, and just a discussion, and after the problem is solved. Finally, there was also a chaplaincy service for the prisoner of wars, with Father Craig in the lead, and especially for North Korean prisoners, but also for Chinese prisoners. What I wanted to say that the chaplain helped to clear up the true intention of the North Korean prisoner, because North Korean prisoner wanted not to be back to North Korea, but to be in South Korea. In September, I finish. In September 1952, Wannstrom of W Earth Services meets again with UNCRE director Kingsley, and obtain complete freedom for transport and distribution, with the US Army and the government helping with the transport. It was very important to have this liberty, to organize directly for the private organization, especially for Catholic Church. Last point, UNCRE released $200 million for Korea, mostly for energy production. In contrast, the War Relief Services alone spent $70 million in Korea from 1946 to 1954. It's very huge. It's very important for a private organization. And it spread over 278 centers. Catholic centers, School of Financial Species, etc., etc., etc. And the administrative board of bishops in US gave also $200,000, etc. Carroll was appointed apostolic administrator of Pyongyang and was responsible for all refugee priests, seminaries, and religious from North. In 1954, Bishop Quinlan, a prisoner of the communists during the war, was appointed regent of the apostolic delegation by the Holy See. So, Fürstenberg laid the responsibility in Korea, and the Secretariat of State organized a new representation in Korea. And Carroll then focused on work of the welfare in Seoul with a representative in Busan, Mr. McLuhan, and 9 regional directors in charge of collection and distribution. To finish, really, Father Craig organized a Korean NCWC in Korea, a committee who coordinated Catholic activity. But as in China, the most important pillar structure at the basis is the welfare, is social work and social action. And in Korea, the autonomy and activity of the wildlife services remained very great during the afterwar. Finally, during the Korean War, serious consideration was given to the Vatican to recreating the Holy See's Information Office of Prisoners of War, who ended in 1947. And tomorrow is Cardinal Spellman's birthday. Thanks.